All right, so your little girl comes to the head of the school lunch line, and the cashier at the end of the line basically says, Mommy and Daddy forgot to top off your school lunch account, and so let me just take that tray away from you, honey, dump it in the trash can, and hand you 2 slices of white bread and a piece of yellow cheese. Now, that may sound like some sort of weird thing I made up for a sitcom on TV, but no, in fact, this happens quite a few times. In fact, in one incident in Utah, it happened to 40 kids all at once. We'll get into the details of why and what could be done about it on this episode of Right Angle. I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this episode, of course, is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Well, men, it's a strange confluence of local administration and federal authority that is our school lunch program. Nationally, the federal program is called the National School Lunch Program, and it provides subsidized meals, both entirely and partially, to students who are supposed to meet certain income guidelines. For example, if your family of 4 earns less than 130% of the federal poverty level, then you can qualify for a completely free subsidized lunch at your local public school. If your family has 185% of the federal poverty level, then you can qualify for a partially subsidized lunch. In essence, you're going to pay 40 cents for that lunch. But the reality is, everybody's lunch is partially subsidized among the 100,000 schools and 31 million students that are participating in the National School Lunch Program, because even those who are paying what is nominally full price are getting about a 28-cent subsidy that they don't even realize they're getting. In addition, the USDA buys a bunch of surplus cheese and bread and all that kind of stuff and vegetables and provides that to schools as well. So the Uncle Sam is deeply ingrained in your local school kitchen. So what happens when a kid doesn't have the money because the parents didn't top off the toll tags, so to speak, and they come up to the front of the line? The school says, I'm sorry, we can't give you the food, throws it away and gives them a cheese sandwich. Those people are now part of a group of the lunch shaming movement that apparently has sprung up. And my wife tells me, by the way, lunch shaming is a storied tradition that goes back decades, and it's been happening for a long, long time. But the reason we bring it up right now is because the USDA is about to institute some new regulations regarding how much the nutritional qualities of food and stuff like that. So, Stephen Green, you have a couple of kids in school.
I do.
And I'm sure that you get up early every morning and cook them a hot lunch and put it, in a container where the hot side's hot and the cool side's cold. But when they go to school, can you imagine them standing behind one of their friends who suddenly has her lunch thrown in the trash and maybe even her arm stamped with a thing that says, I need lunch money?
I'm so glad my boys have never seen this. I'm so glad my boys have never experienced this firsthand. Look, kids are a lot more aware than we give them credit for much of the time, I think. And if a child, we're talking about, second, third, fourth graders, during one of the most, maybe the second to most difficult time of their young lives until, high school rolls around. And they know, these kids know if their parents are poor, if their parents can't pay, or if their parents are just deadbeats and won't pay. And to bring that knowledge, that humiliation, and make it public is just maybe one of the worst disservices we can do for our kids. And if our kids don't know, if they're not aware, and they have this thing rubbed in their faces by the school lunch lady, that might be an even greater humiliation. Why would we do this to a kid who's 8, 9, 10, 11 years old? I can't even imagine doing that. Even nice families, even good families have problems sometimes. You don't dredge these things up in front of the children and use them as agents of shame against the parents. That just strikes me as the most wrong thing I can imagine. I brought up this story with my wife, Melissa, yesterday actually while we were cooking dinner, and the boys were still upstairs in the playroom with doing whatever they were doing up here. And she said, well, I was just topping off the boys' lunch accounts for the last time before the end of the school year, and the parents get together. This is in our school, at our little local elementary school. The parents get together, and everybody chips in a little extra at the end of the year to back pay the accounts of those who couldn't or wouldn't pay. And I had no idea this has been going on, but apparently for the 6 or 7 years that my oldest son has been going to the same school, my wife and other moms and other families have been doing this just on a volunteer basis for as long as our boys have been going to this school. I couldn't be prouder of my wife for that. And this is the approach we need to take. Not rubbing our kids' faces in this stuff.
Well, around the country, there are actually quite a few sort of GoFundMe efforts to do exactly what you just described, as it gets toward the end of the year especially. And there have even been nonprofit organizations that have been founded just to cover the debt of school lunch programs. Now, Bill, this gets into a real strange tangle because, as big fans of federalism, we'd like to push decision-making down to the local level, but those local schools are taking federal money. And then the federal government doesn't say, essentially, how they have to handle students who haven't paid their lunch debt. But what kind of lesson are we teaching children if essentially we violate, Robert Heinlein's "there ain't no such thing as a free lunch"? I mean, after all, the cafeteria lady is a harsh mistress. Isn't that right, Milton Friedman?
As I recall, she was anyway, dishing out slollops of horse meat stew or whatever the hell they were feeding us, some other surplus brand meat-like product. Let me just preface this brief comment by saying that I agree with what you said about this being a local issue. I'm going to talk about this, what I think the solution should be on a federal issue. That doesn't mean I think we should have a federal solution. It's what we've got now. This whole thing should come down to the county level as far as I'm concerned. But the idea of holding 8-year-olds or 7-year-olds responsible for the actions of their parents is just repugnant and disgraceful. And to the larger issue, let's just say for the sake of the argument that there are people in genuine need and those people get subsidized lunch, and there are people who do not have any need and they're paying full freight, and in between are people in the gray area. My response to this whole thing would be we spend $3.5 trillion a year on the most pointless, ridiculous, absurd wastes of money. If we're going to spend money, and again, I'd rather do this on the county level, but if we're going to spend money on things, I think the idea of covering lunches for kids who don't have enough money, whose parents can't afford them a hot meal a day, that seems to me like a kind of thing I'd be willing to kick in for. Yeah. And I think what this really comes down to, Scott, is this. If you don't enforce it, then everybody's going to ride for free. So what we're really talking about is the gaming the system problem, right? Where it's really the tragedy of the commons and all the rest of it. So I think what you need to do is, as a school, you need to make it clear to parents that this is an obligation that they have, and you push that hard. But when you've pushed it as hard as it's going to go and they're not going to step up, then you don't punish the kid for this. At that point, you just eat it, I think. You just pay it. My feeling is that every time you try to eliminate people gaming the system, you hurt both extremes. And just to put a button on this and wrap it up, would you, if either of you guys were told that you do not qualify for the free lunch program, would you try to sneak into it?
No. Hey.
Okay. So there's your answer, right?
Yeah.
The people who can clearly afford this they're just through. There's still some sense of pride, I think, from our ancestors, and so people who can genuinely afford it are not going to try to sneak in on this and save their 40 cents a day or whatever the amount is. I say provide the lunch for people that can't afford it, charge the people who can, and if you're the kind of person who can't afford lunch and you're so low that you're going to game the system and put your child through this kind of thing, I think, frankly, your child has enough problems other than worrying about paying for their own lunch.
Yeah, and let me throw in something, kind of come at this from a different angle. There's a liquor store in town, this is how personal this is to me, that I won't shop at. They've got a great selection and great prices, but they treat all their customers like potential shoplifters. You've got gates and things, and they want to inspect my wife's purse on the way in and back on the way out. We won't go there anymore. I don't mind paying a slightly higher price, which is the price you pay for shoplifters that don't get caught. I don't mind paying a slightly higher price to be treated like a decent human being, and I think we can do the same thing for our kids and their lunches.
Just on top of that, very quickly, my dad was a hotel manager, and I grew up in excellent management, and I cannot tell you how many times I've seen businesses or whatever trying to enforce a very, very short term. When people say this isn't cooked the way I like it, well, that's what you asked for. You're going to pay for it. All right, here's your $6. I'm never coming back to this place again for the rest of my life. That kind of thinking is just small thinking, and I don't think there's any place for it.
Yeah, I think it's challenging in this regard because the story is presented as, don't these children deserve to have a hot lunch? And, who's going to argue with that? Are you going to say, yeah, no, the kid doesn't get the chicken cacciatore. He gets the 2 white pieces of bread with the yellow piece of cheese. So none of us really would say, no, we don't want the kid to have a nutritious meal. On the other hand, the assumption underlying that question is that the school district is managing its money so efficiently and effectively and pinching every penny twice so that the only thing that they can do in order to completely cover the cost of operations is to dun these parents and then to deny food to the children. I, having served on a school board and having sat through probably hundreds of hours of school board meetings and also spent some time as a county official, I can tell you that we're not exactly pinching every penny twice. I'm sure maybe the National Education Association would like to start a matching fund for people like Bill Whittle, who's willing to kick in. And the NEA should say for every dollar Bill gives, we'll give another dollar to make sure that kids have all the food they need to get an education that they should. Look, when your kid goes to school, they need a couple of basic things. They need a place to sit. They need a teacher. They need a way to get there. They need something to eat, and they need some books. And anymore, maybe not books, but an iPad or whatever it is. So we provide the place to sit, we provide the teacher, we provide the bus, we put a roof over their heads. We do not provide the nutrition to get them through the day, except for 31 million students across the country, about a third of the students across the country who do. So that, I think, is the question at the local level. Are local taxpayers willing to say, yes, the school district deserves more money so we can pay for the food, or are local schools willing to say, we can trim our budgets so that we can afford to provide the food for the truly needy people who don't get it yet? For Bill Whittle, Stephen Green, and I'm Scott Ott, this is Right Angle. Thank you for the members at BillWhittle.com for making this happen.